The brand new fuse ability in Tears of the Kingdom, it opens up so many possibilities as to what you can connect together. And of course, I want to talk about all these different connections and weapons and items, but today I want to focus on the arrows, because I think this one is the most interesting one out of them all, because now we have a new button prompt for materials. All we have to do is press up on the D-pad, which is going to easily allow us to fuse any material with any weapon. That includes any material with any arrow. At least I think it's going to be any material. I don't know if there's certain materials that won't work, but based on the list that we saw in game, yeah, I would assume everything works when a leaf is an option. I mean, seriously, on the list of materials, you have mushrooms, you have a Hyrulean herb, and even a leek. So like, what's the point of these things? Not to mention the slab of meat you also can put on an arrow. What could this be used for? Well, I decided to jump into Breath of the Wild and look at all the materials that I currently had and try to talk about what they could do if we decide to turn them into new arrow tips in Tears of the Kingdom. So right now in Breath of the Wild, we have tons of elemental arrows. We can't fuse anything, but we have regular arrows, fire arrows, ice, electricity, bomb arrows, and obviously the ancient arrow. You really thought I was going to waste one of these? Now remember, we are just fusing arrows with these different objects. Now the question is, do we still have our elemental arrows where we can tie them into other things as well? Because that would change everything. For instance, we know we don't necessarily need an ice arrow to fire ice projectiles because we can now use the Ice Chew Jelly. But what if you could have an ice arrow plus the Ice Chew Jelly to make a giant wave of ice surrounding the area and a bigger effect? And maybe you could take these different jellies and fuse them with the different elemental arrows to create really cool combinations. Maybe electric ice, or maybe even fire ice, where it shoots a little combination of both in a swirl. It kind of reminds me of Twin Rova. But yeah, like taking a bomb arrow with Choo Choo electric jelly would be really cool to have like an electric bomb effect, and maybe it has really unique new animations and effects on the overworld that Nintendo made with these combinations. That would be really cool. So I'll be keeping that in mind as we go through the list of materials of things that we can create, because man, customization would be insane if we had different arrows with this as well. That's not even mentioning the ancient arrow combined with some type of elemental effect as well. But let's go through some of the materials. Now, of course, we have lots of fruits and vegetables. Now, I don't know what these would add to the arrows unless they have specific things, like a chill shroom would maybe just make it an ice arrow still. But as far as for the rest of the fruit, I really don't know what's the point of having extra things on your arrow. Maybe for just more damage because the hardy durian is spiky and maybe it could do a little bit more damage than others, but I don't really know what else would really work with the fruit. There is the pepper, where maybe if you shoot it at an enemy, it'll give them a spicy, fiery effect while they'll run around, but I really just don't know what else the fruit would do. Now, you could have the silent shroom arrow, where if you shoot an arrow and you miss your enemy and it hits the ground, maybe the enemies don't get startled, they don't hear it or anything. That would be pretty cool to make sure that you hit your shot. And maybe the iron shroom arrow is extremely heavy and doesn't go very far, but it does a lot of damage. As far as the different herbs and foliage, I don't really know what they would do, because what are you going to do with a pumpkin at the end of your arrow, or a carrot, or a flower, let alone the leaf we already saw? But we do know that meat is an option in this game. Yes, we will probably be able to put meat at the end of the arrow and shoot it somewhere. This is extremely weird, but it might have some type of benefit. What if you could shoot it in an area and draw all the enemies towards it to go pick up the meat and eat it as you get into a cave or something? Or maybe you want to avoid the enemies entirely, or maybe sneak up on them and this could herd them all together. What if you have a honeycomb arrow and it's still filled with courser bees, and you can actually shoot them and it will break when it hits the ground, shooting all the bees out and chasing the enemies like they do in Breath of the Wild. But this time you get to control where the bees land and where they go. That'd be pretty cool. Now everything else on this page is just star fragments and also different pieces of the dragons that you could put on. I mean, they got claws and horns and different spikes and scales, so it would probably do a lot of damage. Or you can shoot a glass of milk at the end of your arrow. Maybe we have some new type of giant water creatures where we can tie a fish to the end of the arrow and shoot it over the water, and something will come out and grab it, where we can actually then fight the giant sea creature. That'd be pretty cool, like the Moldugas we see in the sand. What if we could have a water one? You can use a sunset firefly in order to have your arrow glow, maybe for a dark cave, and that's same with the luminous stone, where maybe it could just glow your arrow if you're in a dark cavern or something and it's hard to see. Now obviously fire works, but this would also stay lit after it lands on a wall or sticks wherever the arrow is shot at, lighting up the surrounding area. Now the other gemstones could just be very powerful arrow tips, because we saw Ember actually has a pointed tip for the arrow functionality. So what if the rest could do that too. Could you imagine how powerful a topaz, ruby, sapphire, or even diamond arrow tip would be? I mean, it would just obliterate enemies. Maybe you could pick it up and keep reusing it for a while since it's extremely durable. The rest is monster parts, and that includes obviously the rest of the Choo Choo jellies. Now the monster horns are all different types and shapes, but the thing with this is we see in the latest trailers that the enemies in this game have different horns and stuff on their head that obviously could be fused to your weapons, including your arrows. So this time, you know, we're gonna want to actually take the battle to these creatures because we're gonna want what's on their heads for our brand new weapons and also our arrows. You have tons of different Choo jellies, like I said, are going to probably all have different elemental effects. As far as the regular Choo jelly, maybe they make it water or just a big splash explosion, but you also have key swings, which we'll also get to. They have different elements which might actually tie into elements as well, but I want to get back to that key swing as we go back to some of the items we saw in Tears of the Kingdom. We have an Octorok eyeball, which could be used for going underwater. Maybe you can shoot an arrow and it will travel and track something down underwater, the same way the Keese eyeball tracks something in the sky. Then we have an Octorok balloon, which maybe you could just make it fly longer and travel a longer distance. But then you have guardian pieces, which I don't know if any of these are going to be in this game because we haven't seen really any guardian enemies at all. But maybe you can construct and make your own type of arrow, like maybe make a brand new ancient arrow that can tie into one of these things you can connect it to. But back to the original gameplay from Tears of the Kingdom. Now, we see a leaf as one of the options, and they don't actually shoot it. All we know is it increases the damage by 1, but it could have a different effect, but Aonuma chooses not to shoot it, because maybe it does do something different. What if you just hold it in front of you and hide behind the leaf? Could that fool enemies? Or maybe if you hit an enemy in the face, it'll cover their face with the leaf and they can't see for a while. Or what if it has a wind gust effect, that when you hit them with the arrow, it's followed by a giant gust of wind that can blow them off surfaces. Now, something else I've noticed is that some of these items actually have hearts by them, and maybe it just means that you can use them for health, so just kind of warning you to not maybe use these up all the way because you'll need them for cooking, but I just thought I'd point that out. And we have some Zonai construct tips that you could probably use as really powerful, just sharp tips for your arrows, but something else I wanted to point out was the key swing. What would this do? Now, maybe something like the Octorok balloon that I suggested, where it kind of flies longer, or maybe it gives the arrow wings that just flies, keep going in that straight direction for a very long time. Could you imagine shooting an arrow like literally across half of the land and just hitting something so far away, barely loaded in? That would be really cool. And then obviously you have an eyeball, which is a homing arrow, but like I said, it'd be really cool if you can combine them with a different type of arrow. For instance, if you had a fire eyeball or an ice eyeball, maybe you could have one tied to the ancient arrow and make a new technology. What if you can control the arrow after you shot it and guided it, like a guided missile, and followed it into a cave or something, almost like the beetle from Skyward Sword? That would be so cool. But as somebody that loves bow and arrows in video games, this is such an exciting mechanic for me. To be able to kind of just put together anything that I want in order to create magical, weird arrows is going to be so cool just to play around with all the different materials in the game. It's going to really make me want to collect things this time around. I have so many materials in my inventory that I just never really used, and I didn't really care about collecting all that much or fighting enemies for. But now I have an actual reason to fight enemies. Now I know why I want to take on enemy camps and why I want to take out bad guys. Is because they probably are holding really good arrow tips and different materials that would fuse perfectly with my arrows. This is super exciting, and I can't wait to see what Nintendo is going to do. If you guys have any more ideas for existing materials in Breath of the Wild, or things that we've seen in Tears of the Kingdom already and what they could actually do and the different effects that they could put on the arrows, let me know in the comments down below if you have any really cool ideas. I would love to see them. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and Nintendo in general. And like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See you guys.